Everything has a purpose. Buddhist teachings for the soul. To live is to face a constant stream of events, both joyous and painful, expected and unexpected. For many people, life often seems random, as if chance alone dictates the path of our existence. Yet, within Buddhist wisdom, there's a deep teaching that contradicts this view. Nothing happens by accident. Everything has a purpose. This is not meant to suggest that every experience is predetermined in a rigid way, but rather that all events hold meaning and potential for growth. The Buddhist perspective emphasizes interconnectedness, the law of cause and effect, and the unfolding of karma that shapes each moment. From this understanding, we can see our struggles not as punishments, but as teachers. We can recognize that behind suffering lies a lesson, behind joy lies gratitude, and behind obstacles lies the chance to transcend illusions. This idea that everything has a purpose calls us to adopt a new way of living, a way that is patient, aware, and compassionate. It demands that we move beyond mere reaction to life's difficulties and instead approach them with mindfulness and equanimity. Through Buddhist teachings, one learns to trust the unfolding of events, to understand that even pain is not meaningless, and to awaken to the fact that the universe reflects the inner state of our own mind. By recognizing purpose in every experience, we shift from despair to resilience, from confusion to clarity, and from attachment to liberation. In this exploration, we will dive into 5 deep themes inspired by Buddhist philosophy. Each will reflect how purpose emerges in different aspects of life: suffering, impermanence, compassion, mindfulness, and enlightenment. These are not abstract ideas, but practical truths that can transform how we interpret our daily existence. As we move through these reflections, keep in mind that the teachings of the Buddha were never meant to remain in books or temples alone. They are to be lived, breathed, and integrated into the soul. Let us begin with the first great truth of Buddhism. Suffering itself has a purpose. The purpose of suffering. In the modern world, suffering is seen as something to avoid at all costs. From the moment we wake until the time we sleep, society pushes us to seek pleasure, comfort, and distraction. Pain, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, is treated as an enemy. We take pills to numb it, consume entertainment to escape it, or suppress it deep within the unconscious. Yet in the Buddhist path, suffering is not something to flee from. It is something to understand. The first noble truth of Buddhism declares that suffering, dukkha, is an inseparable part of human existence. It is not here to destroy us, but to awaken us. The purpose of suffering is illumination. When the Buddha first left the palace of his youth, he encountered what are known as the 4 sights: an old man, a sick person, a corpse, and a wandering ascetic. In those moments, he realized that suffering was not limited to the few, but was the shared destiny of all beings. This was the turning point in his life, the spark that led him to seek enlightenment. From this story, we see that suffering was not a meaningless burden, but a divine messenger pointing Siddhartha Gautama toward his true path. If he had remained in comfort, distracted by pleasures, he would never have reached awakening. Suffering shakes the illusion of permanence. When life is easy, we forget that time passes, that health fades, that possessions vanish, and that death awaits all. Pain, however, forces us to look deeper. It asks questions that comfort cannot. Who am I beyond my body? What remains when the things I cling to are taken away? Where does true happiness lie? Without suffering, the human being would remain asleep, trapped in the endless cycle of desires and disappointments. In this way, suffering is like a teacher, stern yet compassionate, pulling us toward wisdom. Consider the lotus flower, a symbol so cherished in Buddhist imagery. It grows out of the mud, emerging through dirty water, yet blossoms in pristine beauty. Without the mud, there is no lotus. Likewise, without suffering, there is no awakening. The mud of life, grief, loss, failure, loneliness, provides the conditions for the soul to bloom into understanding and compassion. Every painful experience carries the seed of transformation, waiting for us to nurture it through awareness. On a personal level, each person can recall times when suffering revealed a deeper truth. A heartbreak that seemed unbearable may have later opened the heart to true love. A failure at work may have redirected someone toward a more meaningful path. Illness may have taught the value of health, humility, and gratitude. In the silence of grief, one may discover the impermanence of all things and learn to let go. These are not accidents. Each form of suffering carries with it the possibility of liberation, if only we choose to look deeply. From the Buddhist standpoint, karma also plays a role in suffering. Karma does not mean punishment by an external force, but the natural unfolding of cause and effect. Past actions, whether from this life or beyond, create conditions that manifest in our present reality. This understanding brings both responsibility and hope. If suffering arises from past causes, then by transforming our present actions, through compassion, mindfulness, and wisdom, we create a different future. Suffering becomes a reminder not of helplessness, but of empowerment. We cannot always avoid pain, but we can choose how to respond, and in that choice lies our freedom. One of the profound aspects of Buddhist meditation is the practice of observing suffering without resistance. When one sits in mindfulness, watching the breath, watching the sensations, even watching pain, there is a shift. Instead of saying, "This should not be happening," one begins to say, "This is what is happening." In that acceptance, suffering changes its nature. It no longer chains the mind. It becomes an object of awareness. With time, practitioners realize that suffering is not permanent, that it arises and passes away like all phenomena. This realization dissolves fear and brings peace. Furthermore, suffering cultivates compassion. To experience suffering is to be reminded of the fragility of all beings. When you have known grief, you recognize it in others and feel moved to comfort them. When you have endured loss, you see the emptiness in someone's eyes and cannot help but extend your hand. This is why the Bodhisattva, the enlightened being who chooses to remain in the world to help others, is deeply connected to the suffering of all beings. They know that compassion is born not in pleasure, but in pain. There is also a collective dimension to suffering. Communities and even entire nations endure tragedies that test their spirit. Natural disasters, wars, pandemics, these events, while devastating, can reveal profound truths about solidarity, resilience, and the impermanence of all worldly structures. In Buddhism, the teaching of interbeing reminds us that individual suffering cannot be separated from collective suffering. To heal oneself is to contribute to the healing of the world, and to ignore the suffering of others is to deepen one's own ignorance. Thus, suffering has the purpose of uniting us, breaking the illusion of separation, and reminding us that all life is interconnected. Some may ask, if suffering has purpose, does this mean we should seek it out or glorify it? The answer is no. Buddhism does not advocate for self-inflicted suffering or romanticizing pain. Rather, it calls us to understand and accept the suffering that naturally arises in life. By doing so, we prevent suffering from being wasted. Every tear, every wound, every sorrow can become a step toward awakening if we allow it to teach us. In this sense, suffering is like fire. Uncontrolled, it destroys, but with wisdom it purifies, forges, and transforms. The purpose of suffering is not to crush the spirit, but to awaken it. By embracing this truth, we discover that life, even in its harshest moments, is guiding us toward liberation. And so, as you reflect on your own life, remember the purpose hidden within your struggles. Do not run from them, but meet them with courage and mindfulness. Ask yourself, what is this experience teaching me? How is it shaping my compassion, my wisdom, my patience? In every difficulty lies the seed of enlightenment. If this message resonates with you, I invite you to continue walking with us on this journey. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss the next steps in uncovering the profound wisdom of Buddhism and how it can transform your life. Your presence here is meaningful, and together we can create a community dedicated to awakening the soul. The purpose of impermanence. Impermanence, known in Buddhism as anicca, is perhaps the most central and profound truth that permeates all existence. Everything that arises passes away. Every moment dissolves into the next. Every breath we take is both a beginning and an ending. Yet the human heart often resists this truth. We cling to relationships as though they will last forever. We grasp at possessions as if they could remain unchanged. We hold on to identities and roles as if they are permanent markers of who we are. The resistance to impermanence is one of the main roots of suffering, for when we expect permanence in a world that is in constant flux, disappointment inevitably follows. But the Buddhist path teaches that impermanence itself has a purpose. It is not a curse, it is the very condition that makes growth, transformation, and liberation possible. Without impermanence, there would be no possibility of change, no way for suffering to end, no opportunity for awakening. The flow of existence, with all its transience, serves as the backdrop for spiritual realization. When we contemplate impermanence deeply, we realize that it is not merely a philosophical idea, but a lived reality. The seasons change, bodies age, emotions rise and fall, civilizations are born and decline. This constant movement is the dance of life itself. Impermanence ensures that no state of suffering lasts forever, just as it ensures that joy, too, cannot be permanently held. By recognizing this, we free ourselves from both despair and attachment. The despair of believing that pain will last eternally is dissolved, and the clinging to pleasure, as though it could be frozen in time, is released. Thus, impermanence serves the purpose of balance. It teaches us equanimity, the ability to remain steady in the midst of change. On a personal level, impermanence forces us to cherish what we have in the present. When we realize that a loved one will not always be there, we learn to value their presence more deeply. When we know that opportunities will not return, we act with greater mindfulness and intention. Impermanence sharpens our appreciation, reminding us that each moment is unique and unrepeatable. Instead of taking life for granted, we are called to live it fully, aware that time is precious and fleeting. This awareness, rather than leading to despair, awakens gratitude. To see impermanence as purpose is to see every sunrise as a gift, every conversation as sacred, every breath as miraculous. Impermanence also humbles us. It strips away the arrogance of believing that we can control life, that we can hold back the tides of change. In truth, no one is exempt from aging, illness, and death. The greatest kings and the most powerful empires have crumbled into dust. This recognition, though sobering, carries a liberating wisdom. It reveals that clinging to permanence is futile, and that true peace lies in acceptance. The Buddha himself taught that to see impermanence clearly is to loosen the chains of craving and aversion. When we understand that everything changes, we stop clinging so tightly, and in that release we discover freedom. Furthermore, impermanence is the very condition for compassion and love. Imagine if suffering were permanent. There would be no hope for healing, no possibility for comfort. But because pain arises and passes, because grief softens with time, because wounds eventually close, compassion has room to work. We are moved to help others precisely because we know that change is possible, that a kind word or a gentle act can shift someone's entire experience. Love itself is deeply tied to impermanence, for love flourishes in the awareness that time is short. We embrace each other more tenderly when we remember that nothing lasts forever. Impermanence, then, gives love its urgency, its depth, and its beauty. In Buddhist practice, meditation on impermanence is a powerful tool for awakening. One may begin by observing the breath, arising, pausing, dissolving. With each inhalation and exhalation, impermanence is made visible. Thoughts too are fleeting. They arise, linger briefly, and vanish. Emotions surge like waves, only to fade away into the vast ocean of the mind. By witnessing this directly, practitioners come to see that the self itself is impermanent, a collection of constantly shifting aggregates: body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. This insight undermines the illusion of a fixed identity and opens the door to liberation from ego clinging. Karma itself relies on impermanence. If actions could not transform, if causes could not ripen into effects, life would be static, unchanging, meaningless. But because all things are impermanent, each act, each thought, each intention contributes to the unfolding of the future. Impermanence gives us responsibility and agency. It means that who we are today is not who we must remain tomorrow. We can cultivate new habits, purify our minds, and awaken our hearts. In this sense, impermanence serves the purpose of hope. It assures us that transformation is possible. Let us consider the great natural metaphors of impermanence. Rivers never flow in the same way twice. Clouds never hold the same shape for long. Fire flickers and dies. Flowers bloom and wither. Nature is constantly teaching us that change is the only constant. Yet within this change, there is harmony. The falling of leaves makes way for new growth. The death of stars seeds galaxies with new worlds. Impermanence ensures renewal, and renewal ensures the continuity of life. Thus, impermanence is not destruction but creation, not loss but renewal, not despair but the very heartbeat of existence. At times, impermanence can feel cruel, especially when it touches what we love most. The death of a child, the loss of a soulmate, the fading of health, these can seem unbearable. Yet even in these moments, Buddhism reminds us that impermanence does not erase meaning. On the contrary, it gives these moments their meaning. The fragility of life is precisely what makes it sacred. If life were endless, would we truly cherish it? If relationships were eternal, would we treasure them with the same devotion? Impermanence forces us to awaken to the sacredness of now, to see the infinite within the finite. The purpose of impermanence also extends to the grand spiritual journey. Without impermanence, there would be no path to enlightenment. Delusion would remain forever, suffering would be eternal, ignorance would never dissolve. But because all states are impermanent, even the darkest ignorance can be illuminated, even the deepest suffering can be transcended. Impermanence is what makes awakening possible. Every moment of mindfulness plants a seed of liberation that grows precisely because nothing is fixed. The Buddha taught that samsara, the endless cycle of birth and death, is not permanent. And because it is impermanent, nirvana is attainable. In daily life, practicing awareness of impermanence changes how we engage with everything. When we eat, we notice the fleeting taste that dissolves on the tongue. When we listen, we recognize that the sound vanishes into silence. When we hold someone's hand, we feel its warmth knowing it will not always be there. This awareness does not bring sadness alone. It brings depth, presence, and reverence. Each moment becomes an opportunity to awaken because each moment is fleeting. To see impermanence as purpose is to live not in fear of loss, but in the fullness of presence. The teachings on impermanence also free us from the prison of regret and fear. Regret is clinging to a past that no longer exists. Fear is clinging to a future that has not yet arrived. When we accept impermanence, we learn that the past has dissolved and the future is not fixed. Only the present moment is real, and it is here that life unfolds. This awareness liberates us from being trapped in mental illusions and allows us to act with clarity now. Impermanence becomes the doorway to presence, and presence is the doorway to peace. From another perspective, impermanence dismantles the illusion of possession. Nothing truly belongs to us. Not our bodies, not our wealth, not even our loved ones. All pass through our lives like travelers on a road. To cling is to invite suffering, but to release is to embrace freedom. When we accept that we own nothing, we discover that we are free to love everything. This paradox is at the heart of Buddhist wisdom. In letting go, we gain all. Finally, impermanence calls us to awaken to what is eternal beyond change. Though all forms dissolve, the awareness that perceives them remains. Though thoughts vanish, the pure consciousness that witnesses them endures. Impermanence strips away illusions until we are left with the unconditioned, the unborn, the deathless. In this way, impermanence serves as a guide, pointing us beyond itself toward the ultimate reality. So let us not fear impermanence, but bow to it as a sacred teacher. Let us remember that it grants us appreciation, humility, compassion, hope, transformation, and liberation. In every passing moment it whispers, "Awake, cherish, let go, and discover freedom." And now, dear listener and seeker, if these reflections on impermanence have touched your heart, I invite you to walk further with us. Subscribe to this channel so you can continue receiving teachings that guide the soul toward awakening. Together, let us embrace the fleeting beauty of life and find within it the eternal light of wisdom, the purpose of compassion. Compassion, in Buddhist teachings, is not a luxury, not an option, but an essential quality of awakening. Known as karuna in Pali and Sanskrit, compassion is the response of the awakened heart to the reality of suffering in oneself and in others. While suffering itself carries the purpose of awakening and impermanence teaches us to let go, compassion is the bridge that transforms personal awakening into universal connection. Without compassion, wisdom risks becoming cold, detached, or self-centered. Without compassion, spiritual insight remains incomplete because the path of Buddhism is not only about liberating the self, but also about easing the suffering of all beings. The Bodhisattva ideal exemplifies this truth. One who reaches the threshold of enlightenment, yet vows to remain in the cycle of samsara until all beings are liberated. This vow is born from compassion, and it reveals the profound purpose that compassion serves in the journey of the soul. At first glance, compassion may appear as merely an emotion, a feeling of pity or sorrow for those who suffer, but in Buddhism, compassion is far deeper. It is an active force, a wisdom in action, a way of being that arises from seeing the interconnectedness of all life. When the illusion of separateness dissolves, when we realize that the suffering of another is not apart from our own, compassion flows naturally. Just as the hand instinctively moves to soothe the wounded leg, so too does the awakened heart respond to the suffering of others as if it were its own. Compassion, therefore, is not something we artificially generate. It is the natural expression of an awakened mind. Its purpose is to remind us of our unity, to dissolve the boundaries of self and other, and to guide us toward actions that alleviate pain. The Buddha taught that the cultivation of compassion is inseparable from the cultivation of wisdom. Wisdom without compassion can become dry, intellectual, and disconnected from the human condition. Compassion without wisdom can become blind, easily overwhelmed by the enormity of suffering. Together, however, they form the two wings of enlightenment. Just as a bird cannot fly with one wing alone, the spiritual journey cannot be completed without both compassion and wisdom. The purpose of compassion, then, is to balance wisdom, to ensure that awakening does not drift into detachment, but is rooted in the living experience of kindness. One of the most profound aspects of compassion is that it transforms suffering into service. Instead of being crushed by the weight of the world's pain, compassion turns pain into energy for action. The Bodhisattva does not look away from suffering, but uses it as fuel to cultivate greater love. Compassion thus serves the purpose of alchemy. It transforms sorrow into love, despair into hope, and separation into unity. It is the great purifier of the heart. On a personal level, compassion allows us to heal wounds that might otherwise fester. When we feel compassion for ourselves, we break free from cycles of self-hatred and guilt. So often, people struggle not only with external suffering, but with the inner voices of judgment and shame. Compassion teaches us to treat ourselves as we would treat a dear friend, with patience, forgiveness, and understanding. The purpose of compassion in this sense is self-liberation. By turning kindness inward, we free ourselves from the tyranny of the inner critic and create space for healing. Once this compassion is extended to oneself, it can more authentically be extended to others. Compassion also has the purpose of dissolving anger and hatred. In a world filled with division, cruelty, and violence, compassion acts as a balm. When someone wrongs us, our instinct is often to retaliate, to feed anger with more anger. But the Buddha taught that hatred never ceases by hatred, only love ceases hatred. Compassion is the force that breaks the cycle of revenge and creates the possibility of reconciliation. It does not excuse harmful actions, but it understands that those who harm are themselves trapped in ignorance and suffering. To respond with compassion is to refuse to perpetuate the chain of suffering. In this way, compassion serves the higher purpose of healing relationships and societies. At a global level, compassion is urgently needed. Wars, inequality, environmental destruction, all arise from greed, hatred, and ignorance. The antidote to these poisons is compassion, expressed not just in feelings, but in action. Compassion calls us to feed the hungry, care for the sick, protect the planet, and fight for justice. Not because it benefits us personally, but because we cannot separate our well-being from the well-being of others. The Dalai Lama often says, "If you want to be happy, practice compassion. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion." This simple teaching reveals the purpose of compassion as the foundation of both personal happiness and collective peace. From the perspective of Buddhist practice, compassion is cultivated through meditation and mindfulness. Loving kindness meditation, metta bhavana, begins by generating kindness toward oneself and gradually extends it outward to friends, strangers, and even enemies. Through this practice, the heart expands and the walls of division crumble. Each time we sit in meditation and wish for the happiness of all beings, we are shaping the world, planting seeds of peace. Compassion meditation thus serves the purpose of training the heart, preparing it to respond with kindness in daily life. Yet compassion is not only for grand gestures, it is expressed in the smallest acts. A gentle smile, a listening ear, a kind word. These ripple outward in unseen ways. Buddhism teaches that no act of compassion is wasted, no matter how small. Even the intention of kindness carries merit. The purpose of compassion in this sense is to make daily life sacred, to transform ordinary interactions into opportunities for love. There is also a profound paradox within compassion. Though it arises from recognizing suffering, it brings joy. To feel compassion is to feel connected, to participate in the flow of love that binds all life. Those who live with compassion do not drown in sorrow, but are uplifted by a sense of meaning. Compassion gives life purpose because it aligns us with the deepest truth, that we are not separate, that we exist in relation, and that to care for another is to care for oneself. The great teachers of Buddhism embody this truth. The Buddha himself radiated compassion not only for his disciples, but for kings, criminals, animals, and even demons. His compassion was impartial, flowing to all beings without distinction. In the Mahayana tradition, Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion, is depicted with 1,000 arms, each holding a tool to relieve suffering, symbolizing that compassion manifests in countless ways. These stories remind us that compassion is not limited. It is boundless, capable of reaching everywhere suffering exists. Its purpose is universal healing. Another layer of compassion's purpose is that it liberates us from the illusion of isolation. Modern life often fosters loneliness, convincing us that we are cut off from others, trapped in our own struggles. Compassion shatters this illusion by opening our hearts to the shared humanity of all beings. When we see another's suffering and respond with kindness, we remember that we are not alone. This remembrance nourishes both giver and receiver. The act of compassion is therefore not one-sided. It heals both simultaneously. Furthermore, compassion reveals the emptiness of self and other. In the deepest levels of meditation, when one feels the suffering of another as one's own, the distinction between I and you fades. Compassion thus serves as a doorway to the realization of non-duality. It is not simply a moral quality, but a profound spiritual practice that unveils the truth of interbeing. In this way, compassion is inseparable from enlightenment itself. On a practical level, living with compassion changes the quality of our everyday existence. It softens our speech, tempers our judgments, and guides our actions. Compassion teaches us patience when others are difficult, generosity when others are in need, and forgiveness when others falter. In every interaction, compassion whispers, "This being, like you, seeks happiness and fears suffering." To live with this awareness is to walk in harmony with the Dharma. It is also important to understand that compassion is not weakness. To live with compassion requires great courage, for it demands that we open our hearts in a world that often wounds. It requires strength to forgive when wronged, to love when rejected, to give when resources are scarce. Compassion is fierce, not passive. It is the strength to confront suffering directly without being destroyed by it. The purpose of compassion, then, is to empower, to give us the strength to face the world with an open heart. Ultimately, compassion transforms not only the individual, but the collective. When compassion guides policies, societies flourish. When compassion shapes education, children grow into wise and kind adults. When compassion infuses culture, art, and dialogue, divisions are healed. The purpose of compassion is nothing less than the transformation of the world into a reflection of love. Therefore, as we walk the path of Buddhism, let us remember that compassion is not separate from enlightenment, but the very expression of it. Every act of compassion brings us closer to liberation. Every gesture of kindness dissolves the illusion of separation. To live compassionately is to fulfill the purpose of life itself, to awaken, to connect, and to heal. And so, dear listener and seeker of truth, if these reflections on compassion have resonated with you, I warmly invite you to join us on this journey of awakening. Subscribe to this channel so that you may continue to receive teachings that nurture your soul and inspire your life. Together we can cultivate compassion and become a source of light in a world longing for healing. The purpose of mindfulness. Mindfulness, known as sati in Pali, is the art of presence, the practice of being fully aware of what is happening in the present moment without judgment or distraction. In modern times, the word mindfulness has become popular, often reduced to a technique for stress relief or productivity. Yet in the Buddhist tradition, mindfulness carries far deeper significance. It is one of the Eightfold Path's central elements, and is seen not as a mere practice, but as the foundation of awakening. Mindfulness is the lens through which we see reality clearly, the lamp that illuminates the path of liberation. Its purpose is not only to calm the mind, but to transform how we experience life, to dissolve ignorance, and to connect us directly with the truth of existence. At its essence, mindfulness is simple, to be aware, but in practice it is the most profound and challenging of endeavors. The human mind, restless and conditioned by desire and aversion, constantly drifts away from the present. We are lost in regrets of the past or anxieties about the future, rarely dwelling fully in the now. This wandering is not harmless, it perpetuates suffering. Regret binds us to what has already dissolved, fear chains us to what has not yet come, and distraction blinds us to what is right before us. Mindfulness has the purpose of breaking these chains. By anchoring us in the present moment, mindfulness reveals that the past is gone, the future is unborn, and only now holds life. Consider the act of breathing. It is so simple, so ordinary, that we often ignore it completely. Yet in Buddhism, the breath is the anchor of mindfulness. When we bring attention to the breath, inhaling, exhaling, noticing the rise and fall, we reconnect with the immediacy of life. The breath reminds us of impermanence. Each inhalation ends, each exhalation fades. It reminds us of interconnectedness. Without the air, we would not exist. It reminds us of presence. To breathe is to live now. Through mindfulness of breathing, we learn that the body and mind can rest in harmony, and in this rest, wisdom arises. The purpose of mindfulness extends beyond meditation cushions. It is meant to permeate every moment of daily life. When walking, we walk with awareness of each step. When eating, we taste each bite with full presence. When speaking, we are conscious of our words and their impact. When listening, we hear not only the words but the heart behind them. This way of living transforms the ordinary into the sacred. Washing dishes becomes a meditation. Waiting in line becomes a moment of presence. Even suffering becomes an opportunity to observe and learn. Mindfulness turns life itself into a spiritual practice. In Buddhist teachings, mindfulness is often described as the gatekeeper of the mind. Without mindfulness, thoughts, emotions, and impulses flow unchecked, leading us into cycles of craving, aversion, and ignorance. With mindfulness, however, we observe these mental states as they arise. Instead of being carried away by anger, we notice its birth. Instead of being trapped by desire, we recognize its fleeting nature. This awareness gives us freedom. We are no longer slaves to our emotions, but witnesses to them. Mindfulness serves the purpose of liberation by placing space between stimulus and response. Within that space, wisdom and compassion can flourish. Another purpose of mindfulness is to reveal the nature of reality itself. As we observe body, feelings, mind, and phenomena with mindful attention, we begin to see their impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self. We notice that the body is not a permanent entity, but a collection of processes: breathing, digesting, aging, dying. We observe that feelings are not stable, but constantly shifting. We realize that thoughts, no matter how strong, arise and dissolve like clouds. Through mindfulness, the illusion of a solid, unchanging self is dismantled. We awaken to the truth of emptiness, the absence of inherent existence in all phenomena. This realization is not intellectual, but experiential, born of direct observation. Mindfulness, therefore, has the purpose of leading us to insight, to vipassana, the deep seeing of things as they are. Mindfulness also transforms our relationship with suffering. Normally, when pain arises, we resist it, deny it, or become consumed by it. But when approached mindfully, suffering loses its grip. If we observe physical pain with mindfulness, we notice that it is not one solid block, but a series of sensations, tingling, pressure, heat, that arise and pass. If we observe emotional pain, we see that it too changes, that sadness ebbs and flows, that anger flares and subsides. By staying present with suffering, we discover its impermanence and thereby reduce our fear. Mindfulness serves the purpose of making suffering workable, of transforming it from an enemy into a teacher. In relationships, mindfulness is equally transformative. So often, conflicts arise not from the situation itself, but from unconscious reactions, words spoken without thought, assumptions made without awareness. When we bring mindfulness into our interactions, we pause before speaking, we listen deeply, we respond with clarity rather than impulse. This mindful communication fosters understanding and harmony. In this sense, the purpose of mindfulness is to heal divisions, to create authentic connections between people. A mindful listener offers a profound gift, for to truly listen is to validate the other's existence, to say, "I am here with you," fully present. Beyond personal transformation, mindfulness has a collective purpose. As more individuals live mindfully, societies change, violence decreases, greed diminishes, compassion increases. Mindfulness influences how we treat the earth, how we engage in politics, how we build communities. Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Vietnamese Zen master, emphasized that mindfulness is not only for personal peace, but for global healing. He spoke of engaged Buddhism, where mindfulness is applied to social and environmental issues. Thus, the purpose of mindfulness is also to awaken humanity to collective responsibility. When we live mindfully, we realize that our actions ripple outward, affecting countless beings. We tread more gently on the earth, we speak more kindly, we live more ethically. Mindfulness, however, requires discipline. The mind does not easily stay present. It slips into habits of distraction. Meditation is the training ground where mindfulness is strengthened. Each time we notice the mind wandering and gently bring it back to the breath, we strengthen awareness. This simple act, repeated over and over, reshapes the mind. Just as muscles grow with exercise, mindfulness grows with practice. Its purpose, then, is to recondition the mind, to free it from restlessness and anchor it in awareness. Importantly, mindfulness is not cold detachment but warm presence. It is infused with curiosity and kindness. To be mindful is not merely to observe, but to care, to hold each experience gently. When sadness arises, mindfulness does not judge it, but embraces it with compassion. When joy arises, mindfulness savors it fully without clinging. This quality of gentle attention ensures that mindfulness nurtures rather than suppresses. Its purpose is not to escape life, but to embrace it fully. On the path to enlightenment, mindfulness is indispensable. The Buddha himself, after his awakening, emphasized mindfulness repeatedly as the foundation of practice. He taught the four foundations of mindfulness: mindfulness of body, of feelings, of mind, and of mental objects. These provide the structure for observing all aspects of experience. By cultivating mindfulness of the body, we dissolve attachment to form. By cultivating mindfulness of feelings, we transcend reactivity. By cultivating mindfulness of the mind, we see its patterns clearly. By cultivating mindfulness of phenomena, we awaken to the Dharma itself. Each foundation reveals a different layer of truth, but all serve the single purpose of liberation. Mindfulness also has the purpose of guarding our ethical conduct. When mindful, we notice the intention behind our actions. We see whether speech arises from kindness or cruelty, whether actions arise from generosity or greed. This awareness prevents harm and nurtures virtue. Mindfulness, therefore, is not only about awareness, but about responsibility. It ensures that we live in alignment with the precepts, with compassion, and with integrity. In the deepest sense, mindfulness points us beyond time. Though it anchors us in the present itself is timeless. When the mind fully rests in awareness, free from distraction, past and future dissolve, and what remains is the eternal now. This is not an abstract idea, but a direct experience of the unconditioned. In this way, mindfulness serves the highest purpose. It leads us to touch nirvana in each moment. The Buddha declared that mindfulness is the path to the deathless. Through mindfulness, we realize that beneath the ever-changing phenomena lies the unchanging awareness beyond birth and death. Therefore, mindfulness is not a mere practice, but a way of being. It serves countless purposes: to free us from distraction, to reveal reality, to transform suffering, to heal relationships, to reshape society, to align us with ethics, and ultimately, to open the door to enlightenment. Mindfulness teaches us that life is lived only now, that awakening is not in the distant future, but here in each breath, each step, each moment of awareness. So as you listen to these teachings, I invite you to take them into your own life. Practice mindfulness not as an obligation, but as a gift, a way of honoring the sacredness of existence. Begin with your breath, expand to your daily actions, and gradually allow mindfulness to infuse your entire being. In doing so, you will discover that the purpose of mindfulness is nothing less than awakening itself. And dear friend walking this path of presence, If these words on mindfulness have brought light to your heart, I encourage you to remain connected with us. Subscribe to this channel so that together we can continue to cultivate awareness, compassion, and wisdom. May your journey be steady, and may each mindful step bring you closer to liberation. The purpose of enlightenment. Enlightenment, or awakening, is the ultimate purpose that crowns the Buddhist path, the summit toward which all teachings, practices, and reflections ascend. Known as Bodhi, enlightenment is not a reward from outside, but the full blossoming of wisdom and compassion that already exist within. To speak of enlightenment is to speak of the cessation of ignorance, the end of delusion, the dissolving of the ego illusion that keeps beings trapped in the cycle of suffering. Yet enlightenment is not some distant ideal reserved only for sages and monks. It is the potential of every human heart. The purpose of enlightenment is to reveal that what we seek has never been outside us, that the peace and freedom we long for have always been available in the depths of our own being. When the Buddha attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he did not become something other than himself. He realized his true nature. He saw directly the impermanence of all phenomena, the absence of inherent self, and the interdependence of all beings. He experienced nirvana, the extinguishing of craving, hatred, and delusion, and awakened to a state of boundless compassion and clarity. This experience became the foundation of his teaching, that suffering has a cause, that it can cease, and that there is a path to its cessation. The purpose of enlightenment, therefore, is not only personal liberation, but also the transmission of wisdom to liberate others. To understand the purpose of enlightenment, one must first recognize the nature of ignorance. Ignorance is not simply lack of information. It is the fundamental misperception of reality. We believe ourselves to be separate, permanent selves moving through a world of solid, independent things. This delusion leads to craving, to aversion, to clinging, and thereby to suffering. Enlightenment dissolves this ignorance. It reveals that the self is empty of permanence, that all phenomena are interdependent, and that nothing exists in isolation. In this realization, fear dissolves, for there is no separate self to defend. Attachment dissolves, for there is nothing permanent to cling to. Hatred dissolves, for there is no other to oppose. Enlightenment fulfills the purpose of freeing the heart from the illusions that generate suffering. Another way to approach enlightenment is to see it as the flowering of all the purposes we have already explored: suffering, impermanence, compassion, and mindfulness. Suffering awakens the search, impermanence humbles and teaches, compassion expands the heart, mindfulness trains the mind, and together they culminate in enlightenment. It is the natural outcome of walking the path sincerely. The purpose of enlightenment, then, is integration. It unites all aspects of the Dharma into a single realization. It is important to emphasize that enlightenment is not an escape from life, but the deepest engagement with it. Some imagine enlightenment as withdrawal, as a state beyond the world, detached from ordinary concerns. But in truth, the awakened one is more present than ever, fully engaged, yet free. They walk in the world without being bound by it. They experience joy and sorrow, but they are not enslaved by them. Their compassion flows without limit because they no longer act from ego. Enlightenment serves the purpose of transforming how we live in the world, not fleeing from it, but embodying wisdom within it. In practical terms, the pursuit of enlightenment gives direction and meaning to life. Without such a purpose, existence can seem aimless, a series of fleeting pleasures and inevitable losses. Enlightenment offers the highest vision, the possibility of transcending suffering and living in harmony with truth. This vision inspires perseverance, courage, and devotion. Even if enlightenment feels distant, the very act of orienting life toward it brings transformation. Each step toward awakening carries the taste of awakening itself. Thus, enlightenment serves the purpose of guiding us, like a star in the night sky, giving direction to the wandering soul. The purpose of enlightenment also lies in its universality. It is not the possession of any culture, race, or religion, but the inherent capacity of all beings. The Buddha often compared his role to that of a physician. He did not create illness or health, but revealed the cure to the disease of suffering. Just as medicine serves anyone who takes it, the path to enlightenment is open to all who practice. This universality fulfills the purpose of inclusivity, reminding us that awakening is not for the few, but for the many, not for the privileged, but for anyone who breathes. Enlightenment also has a paradoxical quality. Though it is the ultimate purpose, it is not something to chase with grasping. To crave enlightenment is still craving, and craving itself is what binds us to suffering. Instead, the path to enlightenment is walked with mindfulness, compassion, and non-attachment. The purpose of enlightenment is not to give us something new, but to reveal what has always been present, the luminous awareness beneath the turbulence of the mind. In Zen, it is said, enlightenment is the moon reflected in the water. The moon has not entered the water, but the reflection is seen. So too, enlightenment is already here, waiting to be recognized. On a cosmic level, the purpose of enlightenment is to align us with the great web of interbeing. When we awaken, we see that our lives are not isolated stories, but threads in an infinite tapestry. Our joy contributes to the joy of others. Our suffering reverberates in the whole. To awaken is to realize that the universe is alive within us, and we within it. This realization gives life profound meaning. Even the smallest action, a kind word, a mindful breath, a moment of gratitude, echoes in eternity. Enlightenment reveals that nothing is wasted, that every moment is sacred. For many practitioners, glimpses of enlightenment occur along the way. These moments, when the mind becomes utterly still, when the illusion of separation dissolves, when one feels merged with all existence, serve as reminders of the truth that awaits. They give strength to continue, to practice with diligence. Each glimpse shows that enlightenment is not a fantasy, but a reality. Its purpose is to encourage, to remind us of what is possible. It is also essential to note that enlightenment transforms how one sees death. For the unenlightened mind, death is the great terror, the ultimate end. But for the awakened one, death is simply change, a continuation of impermanence. The self that clung to life has dissolved, and what remains is awareness, unbound and free. Enlightenment fulfills the purpose of liberating us from the fear of death. It shows us that what we truly are cannot be destroyed, for awareness itself is beyond birth and death. In this sense, enlightenment is not only the purpose of life, but also the resolution of death. In the lives of great masters, enlightenment radiates as peace, joy, and boundless compassion. The Buddha's presence transformed all who met him. Disciples described being in his company as being in the presence of cool shade on a hot day or fresh water in the desert. The purpose of enlightenment is not only internal but also external. It blesses others. The awakened one becomes a beacon, a refuge, a source of guidance for countless beings. Their life becomes living proof that liberation is possible. So, in contemplating enlightenment, we must see it not as a distant mountain peak, but as the very ground beneath our feet. The purpose of enlightenment is not to separate us from life, but to unite us with it. Not to give us a new self, but to dissolve the illusion of self. Not to remove us from the world, but to empower us to serve it. Enlightenment is the natural destiny of the soul, the purpose toward which all existence moves, whether consciously or not. And now, dear listener, having walked together through these reflections on suffering, impermanence, compassion, mindfulness, and enlightenment, we arrive at the heart of the teaching. Everything has a purpose. Each moment, each joy, each sorrow, each breath is part of the unfolding of awakening. The universe is not random, but filled with meaning, guiding us gently toward realization. To live with this awareness is to live fully, to embrace life as teacher, and to walk with trust in the Dharma. Therefore, let us live not in fear, but in faith, not in despair, but in presence, not in isolation, but in compassion. Let us remember that the ultimate purpose of life is to awaken, to love, and to be free. And so, beloved seeker on this path, if these teachings have spoken to your soul, I invite you to continue this journey with us. Subscribe to this channel so that together we may cultivate wisdom, compassion, and mindfulness, and walk steadily toward enlightenment. Your presence here is part of the purpose itself, and by walking together, we illuminate the path not only for ourselves, but for all beings.